Coaches, thanks for checking in on our roundtable here. Today we've got Carl Galloway from Orange Lutheran in California. We're blessed. We're thankful to have a coach from the West Coast. We were talking a little bit off air about how regionally and certainly among the coast, how it's hard to connect and hard to find out kind of who and what is out there. So it's great to have Coach Galloway here on the roundtable. He's at Orange Lutheran. He's the Associate Athletic Director / the Director of Sport Performance. Did I get that right, Coach?
Nailed it.
All right, Coach. That's about as much as I'm gonna offer as far as a presentation and an introduction for you. I want you to introduce yourself, kind of explain how you got to where you are today. It can be short, it can be long, it can be as detailed as you like. Kind of all the stops along the road. I know there have been a few. That you'd been a member of the NSCA now for 10 years. I'd like to hear what the history of your career is and where your stops have been. You with me, Coach?
Yeah, sorry, it just cut out for a second. Yeah.
No, you're good.
So, well, thanks for having me on. It's a fun opportunity. I'm excited to do this. I guess the history of how I got to where I am. Grew up in Southern California in a town called Carlsbad, down in right near the San Diego County, right near the beach there. My dad was in the Marine Corps, 28 years. He retired when I was about 6, and I always had this passion for kind of work. Like, work made sense to me. So as I grew up, like, I was always the guy who I played sports. I always almost enjoyed training more than I liked playing the sport. Grew up, baseball was actually my main sport. I kind of arrived at this path a little bit differently than some people. I'm baseball guy first, football guy second, I guess you can say. So grew up, went to a small private Christian school, played at Biola University, had the opportunity after my junior year. I got drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies, played a couple years of minor league baseball, and that's when I kind of realized, I'm like, man, there are some people out there who are freak shows. Just the idea that genetically these people were like born with abilities that other people have to spend their entire lives working for. And it kind of hooked me. The guy who was my full-time strength and conditioning coach there, after practice, we'd get off the field and I'd hang out with him. We'd go train, do whatever. We'd talk about training principles and things like that. And I was a business major in college actually up until that point. So when I ended up getting released, went back to college, scrapped my major, got rid of business as my major, and went kinesiology. Graduated from Biola University. Got my first job at Whittier Christian High School. After doing some private industry stuff at a company called Competitive Athlete Training Zone, otherwise known as CATS. Worked at Whittier Christian for a year. Coach Glover, who was on the last episode, actually hired me on as his assistant here at Orange Lutheran in the beginning of my 9th year here. So, yeah.
Now, how long have you? Yeah, absolutely. How long have you been serving in the position that you are now?
So I was initially assistant here. I served as assistant underneath Coach Glover for 5 years. I was head of sports performance for 3 years, and this is my first year as associate athletic director, director of sports performance.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Coach, I want you, Lutheran. If you could, again, this is all as detailed or as little information as you'd like to give us. We appreciate you being on, and we're thankful to have you. Explain a little bit about who your students are, the demographics of who you see on a daily basis. What's their environment like? What's the culture like outside of campus or maybe on campus as well? But what's their home life? What do they look like as 9th graders coming into campus? Where are they coming from being a private school? If you could just explain a little bit about your students.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I was talking to my assistant earlier today, and I said this is one of the questions that we'll probably be talking about. And I'm like, man, I feel like we are on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, we have all the way on either side. The place that we sit in Orange County, it's there's some areas that are very affluent. They're close to the school, and we have some families who come, and then we're within a good driving distance for some families who are in a much different spot. So, I mean, when I say the average of the kids that we have here, I mean, it's anything and everything. And that's one of my favorite parts about it, because we have kids who are able to share space with people who they, in their normal circles, might not come into a regular daily interaction with. So most of the kids here, though, we have some kids who come from what we call our feeder schools, where there's other Lutheran Christian schools in the area who serve from K to 8th grade, and we'll have a percentage of them will come in, and then we'll have a percentage of public school kids who their parents want to send them to a private school, and they'll send them here. And we have the gamut. We have the kid who's played high-level elite club sports from, it seems like, the day they were born up until now, and then we have the kids who come in, you know, they want to make friends, so they want to try out something. And we love them both. We love them both, but it definitely provides an interesting scenario when we get in the room, we get in the facility, and you have freshmen that come in, and it's first day, you have Billy, who I'm friends with his personal trainer, who says, Billy's already squatting 250 pounds, back squat for a clean set of 12. And then I have Jeffy over in the other corner, and Jeffy's never done a push-up in his life. And it's like, well, these two kids are now on the same team. You as a strength and conditioning coach, go. Right? So, I mean, that's
the beauty of our level, isn't it?
Isn't it, though?
Absolutely. It's that challenge of having different characters and different bodies and different levels of athleticism in the weight room is just, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. It's fun. I mean, one of my favorite parts about that, though, right, is you get in the facility, and one of the things we spend a lot of time is trying to teach the kids to, you can walk in the room and you can every day come in and hammer out every set, every rep, and walk out the door, and you'll have done everything you need to do to get you better.
Yep.
But it's getting them to understand that the team is only going to be as good as the other guys.
Sure.
So, yeah, I finish up my set. I do it well. Well, who can I take with me?
Yeah.
Right? We're all on a path, and we try to tell the other kids, who can you take with you?
That's awesome, Coach. Now, you explain kind of who they are coming in and who they are going through their schooling. Where do you guys usually, and you don't have to give specific examples, and we don't have to pigeonhole it, well, where is the typical landing place for your students after their time at Orange Lutheran?
So after our time at Orange Lutheran, we have a good chunk of our kids who elect to go to college. They'll go to college as students. I'd say probably close to 90% of our kids will go off to college. And that's one of the things, like, our goal as a school is we want them to be college ready. If that's a decision that they want to make, we want to say we've given them the skills and abilities in the classroom to go to a 4-year institution and do well. And we have, of that percentage, we have other kids who will have a couple Division I scholarships in various sports, Division II, things of that nature. But the big thing is when kids leave here, we want them to have an understanding, I guess, on our side of the fence, when we're done training them, have an understanding that they can positively impact people wherever they go.
Sure.
And
that's awesome.
So when we talk about, like, a senior, like, what do they look like when they graduate? I'm not as concerned with their set and reps, body mass, like, I'm concerned with, do they understand that they can be an influence for good the rest of their lives wherever they go? And it's the idea that we've done enough with them here to empower them and teach them and say, you know, here's some skills, here's how to communicate, here's how to deal with conflict, here's how to do those things where they can be a healthy individual. One of the coaches we had on campus said, I'll never know if I did a good job until I see what kind of husbands and wives and fathers they are, right? Fathers and mothers, like, we'll know if we've done our part when we see what their family tree looks like.
Sure.
And that's kind of how we think about it here.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Coach. What is number one? All right, let me get to this point because it was on my mind. Explain your assistant scenario. Do you have one assistant? I know that you said you were talking about or talking to one of your assistants before we came on. Who is that? Do you have multiple assistants? Do you have an internship program? What does that look like? Yeah, so
this is the first year of having multiple assistants. It was primarily myself and one assistant. And when I moved in this role as a associate athletic director, it kind of quickly dawned. It's like, well, if I'm associate athletic director for half of the day, where does that amount of work go? Who's with those teams? So one of our athletic trainers actually had an interest in the field. And for the last year or so, she'd been helping out with one of our teams. So when a position came available, she moved over as a full-time member of our team. So we have 2 full-time assistants in the weight room, and then I primarily deal with football, freshman football, hockey, and baseball. And then what's that? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. That led into my next question. I was going to ask what your responsibilities are outside the weight room. Do you coach a sport? Or if you could just maybe go into a few details about your associate athletic director position.
Okay. Yeah, I don't coach a sport on campus. I'm for my primary time here for the 8 years up until this year. I mean, I was full time strength conditioning coach. We have a block period day, which will kind of explain a little bit about how the dual roles work. So we have block periods. So every day we have 1, 3, 5, or 7 class periods, right? We have 4, then the other day we have the other 4. So a full load would be 8 classes for our kids here. So the way the role works out is we would start every day at 7:30, coach through the day, maybe have an off period here or there, and then after school, the teams that didn't train that day will come in and train. And then the next day, basically everything would flip. So what ended up happening is when I took on this hat as the administrative side of things, the first part of the day, every other day, I'm actually in my office handling any type of financial paperwork, odds and ends there, inputting scores. If there's transfers going in and out of the school, that's another part that I deal with. And then anything else administratively that the athletic director feels needs to happen, I handle that stuff. Then the second half of the day, take off the tie, take off the polo, put on the Adidas training shorts, t-shirt, and then I'm in there coaching.
Cool.
So yeah, it's fun. I mean, I get to scratch the itch of like, what's it like to do the administrative thing, but I still get to keep my foot in the world of coaching. So
that's pretty cool. You're living the dream, Coach. That's what it sounds like.
I know, right? Spoiled.
That's awesome.
Spoiled.
That's awesome. If you could, and I also want to add on to the question that I was going to ask next. I want to hear about your programming, but with you just talking about maybe somebody else having relative control of the weight room for the first portion of the day. I want to hear if those coaches are running a programming scheme that is similar to yours or mirrors yours, but if they are running your program or if your assistants are able to kind of take on their own programming. So first your programming, and then maybe let's hear a little bit about your assistants' programming.
Okay. So my programming, I actually try to keep it simple. That's a big thing. I mean, it's if you walked in there like any day of the week, right? There's going to be a barbell somewhere in the workout, right? There's going to be squats. We're going to bench press. We're going to deadlift. We're going to overhead press. We're going to do Olympic lifts. Pretty simple in that fashion. I have, depending on the day, the schedule works out, right? I mean, if I have a team 2 or 3 days a week versus 4 days a week solidly, it's going to change how I do it. So if it's off season for football, for instance, when they finish up and they come back from Christmas break, we'll probably be on an upper-lower split for a little while. I'm a big fan of the upper-lower split. If we can go Monday, Tuesday, off day, Wednesday, then go Thursday, Friday. Typically go upper-lower split. The things we try to key on, we really want to develop a good squat. We focus mostly on front squat here as opposed to back squat. If it's further away from the season, we might front squat day 2, back squat day 4, and then do your upper stuff day 1 and day 3. That's kind of the rough framework of what we do. I initially, when I first started out, one of the things I did, I mean, I jumped in the field, like I said, I came at it from a little different angle, right? Like I didn't have the college grooming that a lot of other guys in the field have, where you had that internship, you were a GA or something like that, and you had someone kind of put their arm around you and like, hey, this is how we do it. This is how you program. And then you had someone that you could emulate at least for a little while until you could take the training wheels off yourself and you could ride. For me, it was kind of, I spent a lot of time on the internet, like, who are the coaches out there who are getting it done? Like, what are some things out there? Like, what am I doing? Right. And it's interesting. My programming, like I was looking at something I did from when I was at Whittier Christian, and I looked at it and I'm like, man, I would have fired me. I'm like, this is bad. And it was just, it's the process of growing. So, I mean, what I'm telling you I'm doing now, I've gotten some rough framework is like the basics. We're going to do the barbells. We're going to get good at things before we try to advance those things. But when I was working with Coach Glover, I mean, he exposed me to a lot. Like that was the person I was able to emulate. When he hired me, like I took the position, like I'm just going to copy him. And that was where I learned a lot of like, okay, well, kids got to know how to squat. They have to. And that's where we built the framework. The programming is built off of that. So within that, like the periodization models that I've tried, I really like Juggernaut method. The inverted model, as opposed to going 3x10, going 10x3 at like 68 to 70%, especially for beginners, it's a really good way to get volume without their form breaking down in reps 4, 5, 6, 7 and on. So focus, get 3 good reps. Then we'll pair that up with like some type of accessory exercise that's going to enhance that exercise or fix whatever that causes, right? So if it's bench press, we're going to do something for the small muscle in the shoulder to kind of retract and pull those scaps back in place. If it's a squat, let's do something that's going to open their hips up so every set gets progressively better because they're developing and kind of getting better control over their core and they're a little bit more mobile. So that's how I program. And then when Coach Glover moved on to his next position and I took over his head, the assistant that I hired, he basically in the beginning was taking a program and we'd sit down together across the table and we pretty much went down the gamut of like every team. So boys and girls basketball, here's what we're thinking. Here's how far their season is. What do you think? And we'd kind of go back and forth and okay, here's what they're going to do. And we kind of worked in a tandem. And then after a little while, I mean, he's a great coach. Like he makes me look like a genius. And everyone's like, oh, the program looks so good. They're doing well. I'm like, yeah, it's because Joe's a great coach. Mm-hmm. And so he took off and he's on his own. So he took the program that we started and he did exactly what you should do, took it and made it better. And he has his own program that he's running, and the assistant now who's also on board with us. She works with both of us, but Joe is kind of taken her, I think, through the same process that I initially went through with Joe. They talk about programming. Hey, what about this? Have you thought about this angle? And she's taking it and kind of making it fit her own coaching style. Because at the end of the day, right, like you have to program around your coaching style as well. Absolutely. It's really hard for someone to do like, oh, we're going to get in there and we're going to grind it out and we're going to be all about these things where if you internal, that's not how you coach. Right. So it's kind of making it fit how she works with the female sports that she has in the teams. And because we're able to take the teams and more thinly slice them now, she can look at it and go, well, this is the program that they did under Coach Galloway or Coach Morales last year. But, you know, from my experience and looking at them, I think they need this. And then she's able to take it and put her tweaks, put her changes on there and make it better.
Awesome. How long are your class periods on a daily basis? How much time will you have with your students? Yeah,
our class periods are 80 minutes long.
Nice.
So I mean, it's nice because we have an 80-minute class period every other day. So, I mean, we lose 5 to 10 minutes on the front end for roll. We open up in prayer every day. That's important to us. Roll, open up in prayer, get them briefed on what they're going to do today, answer any questions, and then we get to work, and then we give them minutes on the back end, obviously, to go change, shower, and whatever they need to get done. So I mean, it's nice. We have great training sessions because of that.
Sure. And then so in the instance of some of those sports that you said that you mentioned you were going to see 4 times potentially a week, would that be after school that you see them? And sorry if I missed that. I told you I'm checking in on the chat and things like that. Sorry if you address that. So you said that football out of season would be upper, lower. That would be a 4-day training split. You mentioned that in your block system of scheduling, you guys are going every other day.
Right. So the training schedule for that team, that would work. So it depends on the week, right? So if we have an upper, lower split, and we have blocks that we call them red and white, there are odd and even days. So if we have a week where they're a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, they'll come after school, preferably on Tuesday. Okay. If it's their Tuesday, Thursday that week, it works out perfect. We'll get them after school Monday, get them after school Friday. And there's some weeks where, bring in, you know what it's like, right? Try to bring a candidate after school on Friday. Like every now and then you want to throw them a bone. It's like, okay, instead of Friday, we'll go Wednesday this week. School's out. Right. You guys go home, right? So.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Do you guys have an AT on campus? Well, you mentioned that your AT had moved over to the dark side, I guess I could say.
Yeah, right. The dark side, man. We're over here breaking people, right?
Yeah, exactly. So who do you have now, if anyone?
So there's actually 3 of them. We have 3 full-time athletic trainers, awesome people, great staff to work with. Our interactions are actually really good. I say actually as in like we've all heard the horror stories of like sometimes strength and conditioning staff and athletic trainers, sometimes we end up butting heads, but for us that hasn't been the case at all. I think on both sides of the fence we've done a good job of kind of like, okay, well, we respect the other side's area, right? Well, they're going to be the experts in acute injury, long-term care, rehabilitation, right? I'm going to let them tell me what an athlete can or can't do because they've earned that right. They've done the schooling. They have the certifications. I trust them as people. They're going to tell me, hey, he's done. He can't do anything upper body. Okay, well, why is that? Well, he did this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, we're good. right? Like we allow that on both ends, and the same thing where if they've cleared a kid and they end up sending him over to me and we start doing things that they're cleared to do and they don't like doing those things because maybe it's too hard or anything like that, they've always backed us up. So, well, you're cleared to do this and I'm not going to pull you out of this. We already injury evaluated you. You're good to go. Get out. You need to go work. So I think for that, in that setting, it's been really good.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you do hear some horror stories. We're very thankful. I'm very thankful personally for my athletic trainer. But I have heard some horror stories of some things that haven't gone as well or as smoothly as the situation that you explained.
Yeah.
If you could, and this is somewhat related, I guess, maybe they help you on it. Do you guys monitor movement? Is there a particular screen, if so, that you use? I know a lot of coaches want to hear about movement monitoring and potentially screening.
Yeah. So I got my FMS certification in 2010, 2009, somewhere around there. I got that certification, and I initially went into it like, oh, I'm going to get the FMS certification, and I'm going to look at this as this is going to be the standard. We're going to FMS every kid we have on campus. And then we got back to campus, and I'm like, we have about 700 plus student athletes. And I'm like, that's a whole lot of screening, right? And it's trying to figure out, like, okay, so how do we do that? So a lot of what I did with Coach Glover is we would incorporate elements that we learned from the FMS and try to treat it as knowns. Like, we understand that. I think everyone who works with this age group understands that when you get a freshman, the odds are they're going to have that huge thoracic curve. Their scaps are just going to be hanging loose from their back, right? They're going to have those types of issues. Their hips are going to be locked up. They're not going to know how to hinge. Like, that's kind of the norm of what we seem to be getting for most athletes. So what we started doing is, well, let's take the FMS correctives that we learned and we'll treat every kid as if they have those issues. So we use the FMS correctives and put those in as part of our warm-up, part of the workout, and it just became part of what we did. And that worked out really well for us. And then this year, as a result of listening to Fred Eves, listening to you, Micah, some of the coach Gary who spoke this summer and sitting at a table with them, we implemented what everyone calls a block zero. And the idea is, okay, well, what are the basic exercises, the fundamentals that we need them to be good at before we can say, okay, you may now begin training. Right. So we spend the first 4 weeks or so. Here's how to do a push-up. Here's how to grab onto a bar and actually pull your scaps down on your way up to do a pull-up as opposed to shrugging up towards your ears. And we try to do a lot of those basics, and that actually corrects a lot of the movements for us. And then once they begin training, we still have those FMS-style correctives sprinkled in there. So when we movement screen, it's kind of an ongoing process of, here's how this looks today. Here's what he needs today. Here's what she needs. Let's give them that corrective and see if we can keep them moving down the line. And it's kind of, it makes it tough at times, right? Because now you're really relying on yourself as the coach that day, like what your eye is seeing. And it's not as structured as the FMS. But for us, we had to figure out something to work because we can't say we're not going to movement screen our athletes. We're not going to look at what they're able to do. Like, you have to do something. And we found that that's kind of sat in there perfectly for us.
Excellent. That's great. That helps a lot, Coach. I appreciate it. Is there sorry, the chat just bugged out. I apologize.
Oh, you're good, man.
Yeah, sorry. I want to go to Coach Glover's question. He sent this to me earlier. He wants to know, what do you do to improve daily, whether it be routines, books, podcasts, visits, what it is you do on a daily basis to improve yourself?
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I try to look at it like this. The big picture, like the 50,000 foot view of how I view it, is you need to set up routines and habits in your life that are inevitably going to move you towards your goal, whether you're consciously putting your foot on the gas every day, if that makes sense. So the idea is that if you set up a strategy where when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is this, and after I do that thing is this, and you fall into habits that are positive for you, then that's the first thing that I try to tackle. So I try to set up to where when my alarm goes off, first thing I'm doing is I try to get out of bed, right? if you get your feet on the floor, the odds of you hitting snooze get slimmer and slimmer, right? So try to get out of bed. I'm going to try to get in the Word. Try to read the Bible every morning. I'll do that. Then after that, I'm looking at my calendar. What are the big things that I need to get done today? What are the immovable objects? And then what meetings do I have? And then I make sure the night before I've already planned out what are my things that I need to get done today? What are my 3 to 5 targets that I'm going to hit today that I'm going to get done? So after I've done that, in a perfect world, I'm able to sit down, grab a book, read for 20 to 30 minutes. It's anything from leadership to training to I've really enjoyed listening to Jocko Willink. He's had a podcast. He's a retired Navy SEAL.
Okay.
I like to throw that on the way into work. I just try to set up like habits and routines that kind of inevitably push me towards where I'm trying to go. But I think a big piece of that is, though, structuring your day so you have time for that. So books that I've really enjoyed, a book called Legacy about the New Zealand All Blacks, the rugby team. Love that one. That's been one that we've gotten in between my assistant Joe and I. We read it a year ago. We started giving it out to friends of ours and everything. Like, that's been a big one. John Maxwell on the leadership side. Love his stuff. But yeah, just kind of try to set up time for that and try to block that off and guard it.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Yeah. Going to Brian Torres' question, he wants to know a little bit about your area. What is the high school strength and conditioning scene like there? Do you have coaches in the area that you can go to? What's your relationship with them, coaches in the area, and what it looks like in the scene of your local schools?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So local schools, so we're in a league of other private schools. There's 7 schools total in our league. So of the 6 other schools, 3 of them have full-time strength coaches on campus. And those are people who similar setup, like us, full-time during the day. It's an interesting thing because a lot of the full-time strength and conditioning coach jobs, at least around here, are in private schools. Public schools haven't started doing that yet. The typical position that you're going to see at most public schools around here is pretty much the norm, where it's the line coach is also doing the strength training for that team, the strength and conditioning work. The baseball team has someone on staff who does it, or they bring somebody in. So the scene is for sure growing. There's more schools who are trying to get creative in how they do that. Maybe we give this person a stipend to do it for the fall, winter, and spring, and then they supplement that with maybe they do training with some of the athletes on the side afterwards. Maybe they run speed camps on the weekends, and the school tries to create a pocket that they can sit into where maybe you're not getting a full-time salary from the school, but we're going to try to provide avenues in which you can provide a life for yourself and still be like our individual for the school. But yeah, the relationship-wise, buddies with all of them. They're really good people, quality individuals who really try to put the kids first. So it's not as if because our schools play each other, it's not as if we got a closed door policy like, hey, when the guy from Modern Day comes over, it's not like we're trying to hide anything. I mean, we share programming. We talk about what we do because at the end of the day, we both know there's no secrets out there.
Yeah.
There's nobody who has access to some level of science that has yet to be found by anybody else. So we're all just trying to do the right thing and try to do the best we can for the kids. So we openly share.
Awesome. I have a question related to that. Is there anything that you guys do from a standpoint of professional development together, or even whatever it may be? Do you guys, is there a certain protocol that you follow in terms of sharing information with local coaches? Maybe you have a get together every now and then. And my reason for asking that is certainly from, just like we discussed earlier in this and discussed off air, like myself here on the East Coast that are kind of like, what are those guys doing on the West Coast? You know, we could kind of get in on what's going on over there. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a way to share either the information of those coaches that aren't familiar with the guys and gals that are out there, or if maybe even we can potentially expand on something like this and get a group of coaches in the roundtable and hear about what the scene is like in the state of California and some of those West Coast states.
Yeah. So as far as we don't have any kind of like structured meetup or anything, we actually were trying to for a little while, trying to figure it out, try to coordinate schedules to see if we could get some of the people in the area around here to see if we could meet up and actually sit around the table together and kind of talk. talk shop because demographically we're all pretty similar. But again, we all have varied coaching experience. We have one guy who was in the college scene for a little while, did private sector work, and now he's back at one of the schools around the corner from here. Another guy who'd worked private sector his entire life until he started working for a school, so he has another range of experience. And it's kind of whenever we talk on the phone or even when we're texting, sending emails back and forth, we pick up coaching nuggets from each other, but we haven't found a way to actually formalize like, okay, this date we're getting together and we're going to sit around the table, we're going to bring our stuff and we're going to talk. But yeah, I would for sure be open to that. And I think they actually would too, because we've tried to do a lot to try to build a community of the coaches that we know out here and the people we're friends with. It would be cool to see if we can expand that.
Yeah, I was just interested maybe if there was a clinic or something that was put on by one of the local schools. That's something certainly that we've been looking for here in Florida that we would like to put together, because sure, there's a handful of us that all are in pretty regular communication, but there's so many quality coaches out there that we don't know, and they might be in different settings and in different scenarios and have a different thought process than we do. They might not even be affiliated conditioning association. They might not even be they might not be on social media.
Right?
They're just
imagine
hidden gems.
That.
Yeah, imagine that nowadays. So yeah, that was what I was curious of, if there was some way that we could get on board, if there was something going on. So that's cool. I would, the one thing that I would ask, if you can keep us in the loop, as far as if something does come up, that way we can get on board with that. I am going to ask you, and I won't ask you now, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but who you'd like to see on the next roundtable as our featured guest. So I'll be excited to hear who that is. And that's one of the things that's so great about asking the guest, is because we get the opportunity to now meet who, and it's not just myself or one of the coaches in the chat suggesting, let's hear from, so-and-so.
Yeah.
If we had done that, and if it wasn't for Coach Glover, we might not have ever had the opportunity to hear from you today. So we've been very grateful for that. It looks as though the questions have slowed down. I want to close out with a couple more of my own.
Okay.
We'll probably round out at about an hour, like I promised you. First and foremost, I know that we're getting back to an earlier question, but when I stalled on the chat, that's what it was I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask, as far as your Block Zero program, is that something that is occurring? Is that something that is occurring for your transfer students or for your new freshman students? Or is that something that you are going to do, maybe that 4-week block is going to happen for everybody for once a year? Do you get what I'm asking? Does that make sense?
I get what you're asking.
So do you go through it once, or do you go through it maybe multiple times on an annual basis, or whatever it may be?
So this is the first year we've done it. We decided to take every athlete on campus who wasn't going into their season and have them start on that Block Zero. And then from what we gathered there, we have a weekly meeting where we grab coffee and we sit down and we talk about all the things that are going on. And that's one of the topics on the table. It's like, okay, so now that we're on the other side of this thing, we went through it. Next year, are we going to make all our athletes go through it again at the beginning of their training cycle? And we kind of go back and forth on it a little bit. I lean towards, I think it would be a good thing to do every year, just for the sake of, you finish up the season, your joints are jammed up, you're a little beat up. Maybe they have a couple weeks off if they're not going into the next sport, because that's one of the things for us. We have a lot of single sport athletes here. So we have a lot of kids who, when they're done playing for us here, when girls soccer finishes up in the winter, they're going to go straight into club in the springtime. Yeah. So they don't get a ton of time. They don't get that the rest you get by playing another sport, where, okay, well, now you're not moving your body through the same motor patterns. Now it's going to mix it up. You go from soccer to maybe a rotational pattern because you play softball, right? So they don't get that. So they kind of keep hammering the same thing. So if we do use the Block Zero, that 4-week, that could be a good way to kind of give them a little bit of break, recover those movement patterns before we try to load up again or do anything else. So
awesome.
Yeah, we're going back and forth on it. That's kind of the thing we're kicking around. But what I love about it is it's still new for us.
Right.
Like, we learned it this summer. Like, we'd seen it around. We learned it. We got a good handle, and I was able to ask some other coaches who are much smarter than I am some tough questions, and this is how they do it. I'm like, okay, we're going to try it out and see where we land. And right now it's like, that worked really well. So now what do we do? And that's figuring it out, right? Process of growth, I guess.
And it sounds like you're on the right track. And I think just as you figured out that after that initial block of training that you kind of initiated that block 0 training, you'll find that whatever it is that you decide to go with, you'll find what works and what doesn't. I trust it's going to work out perfectly. We do have a couple more questions, Coach, from some of our viewers. Back to Brian Torres. Do you ever get pushback from transfer students, maybe about previous training, previous coaching did maybe at their previous school, or I could maybe extend from that, from maybe they're coming in from a private facility that they've trained with somebody else, and maybe just philosophy and methods are a little bit different. And if you do have some athletes that give you some pushback, how do you handle that?
That's an awesome question. That's a great question. So do we get pushback from transfer students? They don't overtly do it. It's not like I say, hey, today we're going to do this and that, and they look at the card and just go, nah, I'm not doing that. Like we don't get that. It's more the subtle, like it starts with the questions, right? Like, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Hey, I don't like that exercise. Can we do this? And it's kind of the poking the edge of the fence to see where the hole is, right? And it's a good thing on some level. Like I actually enjoy the athletes who do that because it means that they've taken ownership over whatever it is that they were doing prior to. And all we're doing is trying to expand their mind and get them to understand, well, as long as you're an Orange Lutheran Lancer, this is how we're going to do it here. And it's getting them to buy in through, I mean, you have to have the building blocks, right? You got to build the relationship with the athlete first, right? Build that relationship. Then you talk to them about why what they're doing is relevant to them, right? You get the relationship, you get the relevance. And once they understand the relevance, then you can actually begin to include rigor, right? Then you can ask for those. Then you can demand things from them. Then you can ask them to do things. What ends up happening if you have a transfer student and you lump them in with the group and act as if they've been here since they're a freshman, you end up applying rigor before you've answered the question of relevance and before you've built that relationship with the kid. And that will actually cause more pushback because you become this overbearing figure who's demanding things from them who, for better or for worse, in their mind, hasn't earned that right yet. So that's a big piece of it with the transfer students. The private facility thing, we've actually tried to be active about when we have kids who are transferring into the school or kids who are 7th and 8th grade who are training at private facilities around here, trying to find out who those coaches are and get on at least a friendly basis with them. So that way, on some level, get on a friendly basis with them. So that way, when I'm talking to the kid, I can say, oh, I was just texting your coach the other day. He was telling me that before you came in here, you were doing X, Y, and Z. Well, hey, that's an exercise we're going to incorporate. We're just not doing it yet. It's actually going to be in phase 3 or 4. So you can it makes them feel a little bit comfortable. Like, okay, this isn't a complete divergence from what I'm doing. It's just, oh, this is something else we're doing, but I'm eventually going to get back to exercises that I'm used to and are normal, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't actually like change as humans, right? People don't like change. People tolerate it. Some people say they like it, but most kids don't actually enjoy change. They get comfortable doing things, and you kind of want to extend that, like, oh, no, don't worry. It's going to be what you've done before. It's going to be similar to it. Just kind of getting them to understand how you do things isn't actually all that different in some cases.
Awesome. From Scott Meyer, he wants to know how speed and agility training fits into your program.
So speed and agility training, it's going to vary on the season that we're in. So we don't typically take our athletes out and do a lot of speed and agility until we get within range of their season. So an example would be football, for instance. So when they finish up, we'll do some stuff between Thanksgiving and Christmas break where we might go over nutrition, we might go over some movement stuff, basically get some testing done, anything like that. So that way when we come back beginning of January, we can start up training-wise. We'll train, and then when we're about 7 or 8 weeks out from spring ball, that's when I have my structured time with them on the field, and that's where we'll actually work on speed and agility. I'm a big fan of doing lateral work as opposed to doing a lot of straight linear work. You won't see us do a lot of like 100-yard sprints with me, 120s, anything like that. We're going to do a lot of what do your first 5 to 10 yards look like, and are you able to stop, plant, pivot, open up, change direction, those type of things. Yeah, because the big thing is we have a lot of kids, like I was saying, where when you have a kid who's a single sport athlete, a lot of these kids, when they finish up playing, they're going to go to 7-on-7 teams, right? And they're going to have a speed and agility guy. So we try to make sure here we're at least covering the things that they're not going to get from other places. And a lot of it is quality strength training. So then when we have the time closer to their season, that's when we'll incorporate speed and agility and those things.
Perfect. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that. Guys, I'll say this to the group. If maybe one or two more questions, and I'll get my last one out here to Coach. And if we don't hear anything back, that'll be us closing out. So, Coach, my final question, what I like to close out with all of our guests that are on here, I want to ask, what do you see? You can go into a little bit maybe about what you see for the future for yourself. It sounds like you've got a great scenario going there. And I bet if I was in your shoes, I'd want to be there for a long time.
Don't get fired is the plan.
Yeah, right. That's all of us. But the future of the profession, the future of the high school level, the future of the coaches that are in here that are very in terms of experience, in terms of age, in terms of responsibilities, in terms of what kind of school they're at. Meeting in the middle of that, kind of a general solution for all of us and what we can do together, what we can do individually to push this level forward, profession forward, really.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The future of the profession, what I've seen, it makes me sound like I've just been around the block and I've been there forever. But I mean, the amount of change that I've seen from when I first started working in a private school to now has been staggering. I mean, the big thing is now we're getting kids who have started training at younger and younger ages, which I think the future of the profession is the structure that we've seen in the professional ranks trickle down into college. I think it's going to become prevalent. Like I see a day in the not too distant future when it's going to become the norm that a school has a full-time strength coach. I mean, it's interesting. There are some public schools just north of us here who have figured out ways where it's a phys ed teacher, but your phys ed blocks are actually strength training class periods, and they get them figured out with the California State public education standards. And if you walked in the door, it is a full-on, full-time strength and conditioning coach doing their thing. And I think that's going to eventually take hold. And I think this position, I think there are going to be more and more positions open for it. I think the future looks really good for it. I think the big thing that's going to be required of us who are already in the industry is to come alongside each other and advance as one, to advance it together. Because at the end of the day, there are so many kids out there playing sports that there are some times where I go and you hear other coaches publicly dogging out other coaches about what they're doing, and it's kind of, that doesn't help the field, right? It doesn't help us advance. So I think a big piece of that is going to be, I guess, as much as we have that structure, right, at the professional college level, like what does it look like if we have that structure with a governing body with focused on our age group of kids, our level of coaching, and kind of help provide some guidance and structure? I think that's going to be huge. And I think helping qualified people, helping the right people get those jobs when they do come open. Whenever I see a job that's open and I might get a text message about it or something, like I have kind of in my head, I try to keep, I'm sure you have the same thing where you have a running list of people like, you know, I think this guy or gal will be perfect for the job. I think they're going to do great for the kids there. I'd love to get them in that job. And it's kind of, that's one of the things where I think as much as we can start doing that as the field, like helping people get qualified, then helping them get planted in the field, I think that's going to help kids out. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like that's really what we're here for. I mean, if we're all trying to get rich, I mean, there wouldn't be anyone watching this podcast and you wouldn't have anything to do, right? So, yeah, I think that's a huge thing is we have people out there who want to do right by the kids. Now let's help them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Coach, I can't speak enough. I can't say thank you enough for your time. There's been many thank yous through this chat. And quite frankly, I've taken probably just about as much away from this as I have from any of the others. I think you, this is one of our first really interactions. I think we had met at the national conference and it was very brief. This was I'm very thankful for you. You make me want to be a better coach. Quite frankly, I think this was an honor for me. And as I said, I know many people are very, very appreciative. You're going to hear from me in just a few minutes. I want to hear if you have any idea. We won't say it on air just in case that person can't make it.
Yeah.
Who you'd like to see on the next roundtable. And again, I can't thank you enough.
Well, hey, thanks so much for asking me to do this. I love talking shop. I love doing that, and trying to get a little bit more involved on Twitter, man. So you're gonna have to help me out with that one.
Hey, you're gonna see this blasted out a few times, so I'll include your handle in there, or whatever it's called. I'm pretty sure it's your handle, your Twitter handle, and hopefully that'll connect us all, because ultimately this is what we're looking for. I want this to be a continued process, and that's really why we started it. Is, national conferences are great and state clinics are great, but when we only get the opportunity to sit down and chat once a year, I think it limits our opportunity, especially when, knowing Coach. Then I can tell just in our brief interaction today, once a year, I want to hear about how your family's doing and how your life is. Sometimes we don't even get talking about the profession. So sitting down and having this opportunity is awesome, and hopefully we can just keep building on it, Coach.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate the time.
Again, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, you'll hear from me in a few minutes. I really appreciate it, Coach.
Thanks.
Thank you.